at the silhouette. Even without knowing this video was about Godzilla, you would probably know who it belonged to. That is the impact that this big gray dinosaur has had on pop culture. He transcends his own franchise. He's an international icon. This video is not just about this Japanese megastar though. It's also about a little boy from Kentucky and about how this lizard has impacted my life. Let's start where I started, back in September of 1998. Godzilla, the TriStar version with Matthew Broderick, came out on VHS, and my 4-year-old self was absolutely hooked. After seeing the 1998 film, I became obsessed with this character, and really at the time I had no idea that it was even a franchise. I thought it was just a one-off movie, and I was only 4 years old, going on 5 years old. This was a whole new thing to me. I had no idea that there was so many movies that you couldn't even count. Soon I found in a local record shop a VHS set of Godzilla King of the Monsters and Terror of Mechagodzilla, along with a third film that was simply a compilation of other sci-fi trailers. Whenever I got home, I immediately popped in Godzilla King of the Monsters. The quality wasn't great, but I really didn't mind. All I could think about was I was about to see another Godzilla film. The first time hearing that thumping of Godzilla's footsteps far off in the distance, and then the blinding white flash fills that screen as the iconic roar bellows with the title stamping in. Then you get that apocalyptic pan shot of Tokyo destroyed. That both terrified and amazed me as a kid. I have seen that film now countless times, and it is an absolute masterpiece. And that's not just for Japanese cinema either. That's for all of cinema. Godzilla is probably one of the most influential things in my life. It inspired my love for dinosaurs, my inspiration for drawing, and filmmaking as well. I couldn't imagine what I would be like without discovering Godzilla. Growing up in the late 90s, we didn't really have internet, so trying to find out things about the Godzilla franchise was hard. I would go to the video store and discover new movies all the time. It was so fun. Every other weekend, I would beg to go to the video store. Now, I know there's 34 movies, with the 35th movie right around the corner with the new Godzilla King of the Monsters. But at the time, in 1999, there was 23 films, all of which were released by different companies. It was a mess, really. And still today, the rights for some of these films are all jacked up, with it split between companies, with Sony and Kraken holding the majority. Toys and figures I also made a large collection of, starting with merchandise from the 1998 TriStar film, and then expanding into the Trendmaster figures. Those were more accessible for me as a kid at the time, because pretty much both of those sets you could get at any toy store, really. You could get at McCabe or Toys R Us. They were very accessible. And then as the years went on, I found out that there was countless numbers of Godzilla figures that you could get if you ordered them from Japan. And then even Bandai began releasing Godzilla lines in America, so that really boosted up my collection a lot. And I remember I spent countless days of my life smacking those little plastic figures together, making the roars and humming the Godzilla tune as the two figures just clashed together, and I would make all these crazy scenarios. And it was just a franchise that allowed childish imagination and creativity. As a kid, Godzilla was all about the giant monsters duking it out and having massive city destruction. But growing up reveals a whole new side to the franchise. The simple monster brawl turned into a metaphor of human flaws and the conservation of nature. Diving in deep reveals a history of catastrophic events and the trials and tribulations of a culture, and the darkness of humanity. The Godzilla franchise is absolutely fascinating, and I'm so excited to see it's finally getting to the mainstream. Now, with new people jumping in, we need to go back to the past, back to where it all began, 1954, to go through Big G's history. So come, join as we explore the cultural atomic bomb that is Godzilla. Tomoyuki Tanaka, a famous producer of Toho Studios, was traveling back home to Japan from the United States. It is said he heard the news of a fishing boat called Daigo Fukuryu Maru, or its English name, Lucky Dragon 5, a fishing boat that had its 22-man crew contaminated by nuclear fallout. This fallout of which came from the Castle Bravo thermonuclear bomb test around the Marshall Islands and the Bikini Atoll. Tanaka sat on the idea of nuclear weapons, and with inspirations like King Kong and the recently released Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, thought, what if those bombs awaken a monster that would attack Japan? Thus, the concept that would soon become Godzilla was born. Tanaka took this idea and pitched it back to the studio of Toho in Japan. The studio soon greenlit it, but they put a very tight deadline on the production. Ishiro Honda was made the director, and along with his colleagues, they would create a masterpiece. A man named Eiji Tsuburaya was assigned as the special effects director, an important role for a movie built on the concept of a giant monster rampaging. Originally, Tsuburaya planned the monster scenes to be done in stop motion, the same technique that was used in King Kong, but that form of animation is very time consuming, and the studio was only given a few months to make the film, so a new method of filmmaking would be developed. They landed on the idea of just using a suit and puppets to portray the monster, a revolutionary idea that would spawn the term suitmation. This style would soon go on later to define the entire Japanese kaiju genre. During this time of pre-production, the monster was given his name, Gojira. Gojira comes from two Japanese words, gorira for gorilla, and kujira, which is for whale. Mashing the two together, they came up with Gojira. The reason they gave the monster this name is because they thought that it would not only give the monster the strength of a gorilla, but also the scale and size of a whale. As production continued, the monster's design varied, but ended with the iconic look that we have now, of a large reptile with dorsal spikes running down its back. The skin of the suit was made to look rough and distorted, drawing inspiration from the burn victims of the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Its eyes were positioned to look downward, as if staring upon humanity. The ability to breathe atomic fire was also added, to allow for more visual callbacks to the atomic bombs and their destructive nature. After the final design was finished, a 200-pound suit was constructed, and a man named Haru Nakajima would be placed inside for a rigorous 3-month production. Nakajima once said filming on the first Godzilla movie was very rough. The suit was not only very stiff and hard to move, but so heavy that he could barely keep himself up, and oftentimes he would fall over. As the years would go on though, the suit would be toned, redesigned countless times, and overall, the production quality of the suits would be made in the mind of a person using them better. Towards the end of production, Akira Ifukube was brought on to compose the score for the film, in which he was only given a few days to complete it. But in that short time, not only did he give us one of the most amazing soundtracks of all time, but he also created the most iconic roar in cinematic history. That classic Godzilla roar is made by using a resin glove and rubbing it over a double bass, and it's absolutely fantastic. On November 3rd of 1954, Gojira would release in Japan to moderate success, gaining 152 million yen. Like any successful film, a sequel was quickly rushed into production. Meanwhile, Toho gave Gojira the English name of Godzilla and readied an American release, along with the help of Trans World Releasing Company. The film was vastly re-edited, adding new scenes with actor Raymond Burr to appeal to the Western audience. Any reference to nuclear atomic weapons were removed in order to not offend the people of America. In 1956, the movie would release in the States as Godzilla, King of the Monsters. Unlike in Japan, this version was panned and was seen as just another monster movie. One of the reasons for this is because at the time, atomic monster movies were fairly common already in America. You already had giant monster movies all the time. Like stated previously, just a few years before this, Beast from 20,000 Fathoms was released, which is kind of the same concept as Godzilla from the beginning. It's a giant lizard rampaging through a city. And America just didn't see the appeal for Godzilla because most of the appeal that was there, that was relatable and had meaning to it, was stripped out for the American version. Still, however, even with the panning, the movie still was a success. Alrighty guys, well thanks for watching. We hope that you learned a lot. And yeah, tune in next time on episode 2 where we're going to begin the history of the Showa era. We'll have some synopsises and trivia for each movie. And yeah, remember to like, subscribe, hit that bell if you liked the video, and leave some comments down below and tell us what you thought. And we'll see you then.